Welcome to another episode of Save Yourself. This one is an amazing episode. If I have to say, out of all the episodes I've done so far, this is probably going to be the one that is the big game changer for you. It is how to eat, fast, and live with your cycle. Now, if you're in perimenopause, you want to listen up because we're going to start backwards. So we're going to start from perimenopause and move through the different parts of our cycle. We know that nutrition may be the most important determinant of our symptoms and our outcomes. However, we pay little to no attention to nutrition in our healthcare system for women in perimenopause or women that are cycling. So what I want to do for you is really talk to you about the foods that you should be eating, how you should be fasting, the underlying mechanisms so you can understand how to live your optimal self at every part of the cycle. We're going to start with perimenopause and we're going to move into the different stages of the menstrual cycle. We're going to talk about periods. We're going to talk about what if you have abnormal cycles, what if you're on birth control, hormone therapy, all of it. And I want to preface this by saying I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for joining this journey. We have so much planned for this podcast. We are very, very thankful to our first sponsor. So our first sponsor is Truly Nutrition. They have an amazing wellness shot that is something that you can start your day with. It's turmeric and ginger, and it's got a little bit of spice and a little bit of sweet. They're giving 50% off to anyone who orders that. You have to do the subscription base, and the link is in the show notes. So please check that out. Our second sponsor is Chai Protein Plus. So as you may know, I make a chai mix that's wildly popular. It's called the Chai Latte, the Amy MD Wellness Chai Latte. It's available at amymdwellness.com. Now, because of the popularity of the chai latte, we thought, okay, what is it that people really, really need? And that is more protein in their diet. So I'm really excited because the chai protein is great. You can just mix it with water. You can add it to your yogurt. You can add it to your oatmeal. You can just take it with you and literally add it to anything. It's very easy to mix. And you can get 20 grams of protein in 100 calories. Purest, cleanest one you probably will ever find. It's made in the USA. It's tested for pesticides and heavy metals. So we'd love for you to check it out with the discount code in the show notes. And, today's episode is really a special one because I don't think enough people are talking about cycles, women's hormonal cycles. In fact, when I was in training, I was a fellow in immunology. So after you go to med school, you have to do a residency. So a junior doctor training. A lot of you might have heard of what residency is. So I did my residency in internal medicine. And then I chose to do a fellowship in immunology and allergy. During my fellowship at Columbia, there was a research year, and we could pick any research topic we wanted. And of course, what would I pick? I have always been so passionate about hormones, women's health, and nutrition that I wanted to do a project on hormones and the immune system and the nutrition interplay. And I don't want to say who, but there was someone in my department who was kind of like my mentor. And she looked at me and she said, "That's not a real project. That's not a real scientific project." And I said, "Why not?" She's like, "Well, there's very little research. There's almost nothing we know. So you have very little to start on. It's not an area that's hot, not an idea that's going to be taken up by publications." And she basically said, "This is a soft science." It made me kind of feel like a loser, to be honest. And I went home and I was really upset. The next day, she came to me and she said, "Hey, listen, if you want to study hormones, go for it, but you got to do it in the basic science setting. You have to make it super scientific." And so I did a basic science study. That means that when you go, instead of looking at humans, you look at cells and you look at the effects of hormones on cells. And that's my project. That was my fellowship project. I looked at women's hormones and their effect on the immune system, especially on eosinophils and basophils. Those are type of like immune cells in our body that are associated with a condition called chronic urticaria. That was my specific topic. In any case, I was excited to learn more about hormones, but I was not excited to know that there was so little, like literally, we don't even know what estrogen or progesterone does to our cells. It is in the basic phases. As you know, women's hormones have not been studied. And it wasn't until 1993 that women were even mandated to be in studies. And even then, the studies have really focused on different things, not really women's hormones. So I'm excited to talk about this today. We are going to talk about what the cycle is like, how you should eat, fast, and live, really actionable steps that you can take. I'll start by saying a story that really is fascinating. So I do some consulting and I do some wellness consults, and I'm working with someone, and she revealed to me that when she got her period, I think she was like 14, no one had ever talked to her about what a period was. And she was away at camp, and she woke up one morning and she got her period, and she was so afraid because she didn't know what it was. No one had ever told her what it was, why this happens, what the purpose of it is. And then on the other end, my mom and her friends explained to me that they were in the same situation when it came to menopause, that they felt like their brains were changing, that their bodies were changing, that nervous system was changing. And I'll explain to you why this happens. And no one told them that this was coming. No one told them that this was a normal part of a woman's life. No one told them that this is called perimenopause. And my mom revealed to me in one of the old episodes, you can check out the episode I did with my mom and dad. She said she just thought she was going crazy. No one told her that this was a normal part of life. And so I want to demystify this, and I want to give some actionable tips for you, like what you should be doing. Hey, maybe you should be eating this certain thing. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get started. First thing you should know is that estrogen has an effect on our appetite, and it has an effect on our nervous system, and it has an effect on our insulin signaling system. So why that's important, I'm going to tell you in a little bit, but you have to know that. I don't think most people even know this, that the hormone estrogen is not just for childbearing and periods, and it's actually really, really key in brain metabolism and muscle metabolism, in hunger hormones, and so much more. So this is how it works. In the beginning of your cycle, so say day 0 is when you get your period, and you start the beginning of your cycle, that's called the follicular phase. Now, the beginning of your cycle, your estrogen is on the rise, and around ovulation, around day 14, so right before ovulation, estrogen peaks. When estrogen peaks, there are studies that show you have the most positive affect. That means you feel good, you have a positive outlook on life, you're enthusiastic, you're social, you can take the biggest risks, you're the most stress resilient. And so if you were able to kind of figure out when that happens in that 3 to 4 day range, that is optimal time to plan activities that would require those things. That is when you want to be eating. You can tolerate more carbohydrates. You can tolerate more stressful workouts. This is when you can tolerate longer fasting. This is also when you are more gregarious, more outgoing and enthusiastic. It's also when you should be asking for the biggest things in your life. So that is when your estrogen is peaked. Now, let's move back now. When you talk about perimenopause, when you're in your late 30s, your 40s, and your 50s, your estrogen is starting to trend downwards. And not only are you going to get the cyclical change over the month's time, you are going to get a gradual decrease in the estrogen. So what does that mean? That means that effectively you have a bigger appetite, because estrogen is an appetite suppressant. So when you have less estrogen, you have more of an appetite. So you may notice that you're kind of grabbing more snacks. It also has an effect on your insulin. And so when your estrogen starts to go down, you become more insulin resistant, which is why a lot of people feel the effects of weight gain, during menopause, and perimenopause, the years before menopause. Because during perimenopause, as your estrogen levels are trending downwards, you are more hungry and you are less insulin sensitive, so that your blood sugar levels stay higher longer, causing more fat to be deposited. So specifically in perimenopause, there are studies that show there are specific changes in your diet that can help both boost the estrogen levels and also counteract the effects of lowered estrogen. For example, it has been seen in studies that eating more omega-3 fatty acids can really help mitigate some of this. Eating more fiber can help mitigate some of this. Eating more protein can help mitigate some of this, and eating more probiotic foods can mitigate some of this. But only 40% of women are getting enough omega-3 fatty acids from either oily fish, plant-based sources, or algae oil. And less than 20% of women are getting adequate fiber. We don't know the protein data as much, but we know that most women that I talk to are not eating adequate protein. And definitely, we don't see most people eating a lot of probiotic foods. These are things that can help you as the estrogen levels are changing during perimenopause. Now, if you understand that part, that estrogen, when it goes down, has these effects, you can understand why that a woman who's cycling during that last week of her cycle, days 21 through 28, that's when your estrogen really falls, because your body says, okay, egg is not fertilized and we're going to drop the estrogen levels. So it's kind of like a mini perimenopause. What you feel in PMS may be a clue to what you may feel in your perimenopausal years. And the same things that I am suggesting for you to do during perimenopause would be the same things that you would do during that week of your cycle. So more fiber, more omega-3 fatty acids, more probiotic foods, more protein. And, I know you hear me talk about magnesium and vitamin D all the time, but these are two things that can really help also, according to the studies, during this time of month and also during perimenopause. So what I'm suggesting to you is that perimenopause is a lot like PMS, like an extended PMS in some ways. Obviously, it's different in that perimenopause, most people are still having a cycle and you're still going up and down with your estrogen and progesterone levels. However, the same kind of symptoms you get during PMS that happen because of your lower estrogen levels may start to happen, especially at the later phases of perimenopause. The other thing that happens as estrogen levels go down is that you start to develop more visceral fat. That is the dangerous fat that's around your organs. So not only do you feel more hungry, your metabolism is slower, your muscle is less metabolically active, and you're more insulin resistant, all because of lower levels of estrogen. This kind of milieu, along with higher levels of inflammation, actually causes weight gain. Did you know that the average woman gains 20 pounds between the ages of 40 and 60? So I don't understand why we don't talk more about the effects of estrogen on our body during perimenopause. Let women understand what's happening to their bodies, empower them with this information and say, hey, it's not just in your head. Yes, you're feeling the effects of lowered estrogen on your brain, on your muscles, on your insulin levels, on your appetite. And yes, that's probably the reason you're gaining weight, and especially visceral fat. And you know what? There are things you can do about it, like adding more fiber to your diet, like adding more omega-3 fatty acids, like adding more magnesium, adding more vitamin D, more probiotic foods. I actually like to use the mnemonic 30-33. 30 grams of protein in your first meal. That gives you the best chance of getting a higher protein diet. 30 grams of fiber in throughout the day. Most people, like I said, over 80% are not getting that. And 3 probiotic foods a day. That can be a yogurt, that can be a kimchi, that can be sauerkraut, that can be apple cider vinegar and water. 30-33 really sets up your day to counteract the effects of the changing estrogen. We have several studies now that show that changes in the diet and lifestyle can reduce weight by 10 pounds and can reduce hot flashes by over 30%. In a study of over 6,000 women, they looked at women between the ages of 45 and 75, and they found that those that had higher levels of fruits, vegetables, and omega 3s did have an overall improved experience in perimenopause. And the more fruits, vegetables, and vegetable fat that they consume, the less their visceral fat deposition, which is the dangerous fat deposition that happens during perimenopause. Now, what you may not know, what people may never have told you, is that estrogen has an effect on our basal metabolic rate. You will be using 250 to 300 less calories a day because of the lowered BMR. If you don't change your diet and lifestyle around this, that is an average of 5 pounds a year that you will gain during perimenopause because of the changes. Now, obviously, this is extremely variable. Some people gain less than that. Some people gain much more than that. We now have studies that show that this 30-33 type diet, so something that's higher in protein, higher in fiber, higher in probiotic foods, can be protective. A lot of the studies look at the Mediterranean style diet where there's healthy fats, there's some carbohydrates, but there's very little ultra processed food. One of the things I don't think we talk enough about is that as you move into perimenopause, or if you're in your late luteal phase of your cycle, your gut microbiome changes. So estrogen helps a lot of gut bacteria live. Okay, so when your gut bacteria don't see estrogen because you're in perimenopause, or you're just in that one phase of your cycle that's called the late luteal phase, or PMS, premenstrual syndrome is the colloquial term for it, those gut bacteria die off. And so your microbiome changes during that time. So we know that if you want to counteract some of the negative changes during perimenopause, you want to improve your gut microbiome. So how do you improve your gut microbiome? Fiber, protein, probiotic foods. So that should be something that is easily understandable, that because of all these different reasons, you want to be including more of those. Now, B vitamins can be really, really important. Vitamin D, magnesium that I've mentioned. Also, there's good evidence that soy isoflavones, so like edamame and soybeans and organic tofu, can be useful during this time. There's a study that shows that 80 grams of tofu or 400 mLs of soy milk can be useful in perimenopause because of its estrogen boosting effects. All right, let's step back and talk about the female cycle in general. When you are cycling as a female, the day 1 through 7 will be your menstrual cycle. So most people don't feel great on day 1, 2, but about day 3 or 4, they're feeling really good. Their hormones are starting to really pick back up, both estrogen and progesterone. And again, I told you there's a peak around ovulation. So around days 10 through 14, you are going to feel your best. You're most insulin sensitive, you're most stress resilient, you're most energetic, your affect, mood and affect, your external enthusiasm for the world, your socialness, all peaks around that time, the days 10 through 14. So if you're someone who likes to track your cycle, that is a great time to plan a longer fast, a harder workout, a social event, a job promotion ask. All of those things can be really, really beneficial for you in that period. Shortly after ovulation, you start to see a drop in your estrogen levels as well as your progesterone levels. Now, when you are kind of in the day 21, you'll see kind of a big drop in your estrogen. So a lot of people, even 1 week before their period, will feel a really low mood, disturbed sleep, and a big hunger spike. And that's because you get one little dip around day 21, 22. And then it kind of boosts up a little bit for the next couple of days. And then again, it's trending downwards all the way towards your period. So the late luteal phase, day 21 through 28, can be a really rough time for women. And that's why, people get symptoms, and it's called PMS because premenstrual syndrome. That is the time that you really want to support those low estrogen and progesterone levels through your nutrition, through your lifestyle, through your exercise. So what do I recommend? During that last phase, days 21 through 28, less stressful exercise, less stressful activities, less of the caffeine, more sleep, shorter fasting, more fiber to keep your blood sugar stable, more foods that not only satisfy your hunger and cravings, but keep your blood sugar stable. So you don't want to be eating candy and tons of refined chocolate, like what you feel like eating, honestly, during that time. You really want to eat, like, say, for example, sweet potatoes, oatmeal, rice, all of these with vegetables, all of these things that have carbohydrates but are balanced with protein and other fiber sources so that you're not spiking your sugar and then dropping it again. And causing that craving hunger cycle, which can also exacerbate how bad you feel during that time because you're probably going to feel quite fatigued at that time. That's why, female athletes often really know their cycles and know to fluctuate their training sessions during that time. But if you're someone who's hearing this for the first time or wanting to really, really hone in on this is the week, day 21 through 28, that you probably want to participate in more self-care, more sunny walks, more sleep, more restorative yoga, more things that you can do to help your brain and body recover from kind of lowered hormone state. So now you understand why I talk so much about perimenopause, because perimenopause is like a really long, up to 10-year span where you're actually feeling low hormone state. So it sounds really daunting, but honestly, once you understand even these basic things that we're talking about, you can start to change the way you eat, change the way you live, and really optimize your cycle. So if you were like, hey, I really kind of get this, but I want to know like actionable tips, like what am I going to do, the beginning of your cycle, the middle, the end. So let's talk about it now. So day 1 is your menstrual cycle. About day 3, you're up and about and you're starting to do your activities. And I'm going to say, they say, train like an athlete, eat like an athlete for the next 7 to 10 days. So you really want to push yourself, if you'd like, in your workouts, in your fasting. You can tolerate more carbohydrates. You can tolerate more stressful activities in your life. And that's the time that you want to time anything if you can. Peaking around ovulation days 10 through 14. So that's when you are at your peak. That's when you want to ask for that promotion. That's when you want to do that race if possible. That's when you want to test your capacity for weight training. That's when you get the picture. That's when you're going to be at your peak. And if you can't really figure it out, start as tracking from day 1 of your period, and around day 10 through 14, that's when you're going to feel that. Once you tune into it, you probably get a good idea. You're also going to have positive affect. So your life is going to look a lot rosier during those days than it does right before your menstrual cycle. So that's kind of a nice way to think about how to eat and live and fast during that time. Remember, relationships are really affected by hormone levels as well. We know evolutionarily, right? We think that the peak of estrogen is also the time that you're ovulating. That's the biggest time that you could procreate. So they want you to be social. They want you to be with your partner. They, evolutionarily, it makes sense that you'd want to be more social at that time. And then as your hormone levels fall, if you don't get pregnant, that is a time where you are going to notice changes in your energy level, probably a decrease in your energy level, also a decrease in your affect. So your enthusiasm, your outlook on life, your happiness levels, your ability to, process conflict in relationships goes down. So, there's even studies that show that women, when they're in the ovulation state, days 10 through 14, have the best types of relationship, interactions during that time. Whereas when the hormone levels fall, kind of in the late luteal phase, day 21 through 28, it's they have negative interactions, and this really affects people's relationships and their marriages. And so, understanding the fluctuation like that can help you with your own relationships. So, like they say, never trust the way you feel in those days about your life, about your job, about your partner, those couple of days before your period, because generally estrogen does have an effect on your brain, your mood, your energy levels, and your outlook on life. And there are good studies to show that. So when you are thinking about it from the relationships realm, kind of see if you're in a difficult relationship, you should assess it both at the late luteal phase, but then assess it in your peak phase, that ovulation phase, that hot days 10 through 14 or 16, and see how you feel about it then. Same thing goes about your job and big decisions. Those are the 2 points that you could use as a check on your relationships. So 90% of women say they have symptoms during their premenstrual phase, that late luteal phase. And 75% of women say that they experience hormonal fluctuations and symptoms because of it during perimenopause. So these are things that everybody should know about. Whether you're a woman or not, you should know about these fluctuations so you can better support your partner or understand where people are coming from. In Japan, they did a study and they found out that these premenstrual symptoms actually made them lose about 680 billion yen annually, and that 70% of women did experience some of these symptoms that reduced their ability to work appropriately. So basically, 70% of the women had to reduce their work hours or quality because of dysmenorrhea. So it is a real issue, and this is very, very true about perimenopause as well. So we have to talk about this more. We have to counsel women on how to eat and live and fast and really understand what's happening to their bodies. Now, you may be asking, what about if you're on oral contraceptive, hormonal birth control, things like that? So we do know that women will still have some of these same symptoms, but their symptoms will be less fluctuant. So for example, just like, often women, when they have very, very severe PMS symptoms, they will be put on hormonal birth control. So they're not as cranky and not as down during the PMS, the late luteal phase. They will also have less of a boost of mood and a positive affect during the ovulation phase. So you might not see a big of a up and down if you're on oral contraceptives. We also know that diet quality has a huge impact on all of this. Now, I told you already that the fiber, the protein, the probiotic foods matter, but we have really great data that omega-3 fatty acids and B vitamins, especially B12, vitamin D, magnesium, can really impact this time as well. And of course, there are things like anti-inflammatories like turmeric and antioxidants and berries. All of those things can be really, really useful in both the perimenopausal state and also the late luteal phase. And so takeaways. When you're in your late luteal phase, days 21 through 28, you want to rest and recover. You want to do less fasting, less stressful exercises, less things that will make your blood sugar fluctuate. Right? So those are the kind of activities. So you might go for more sunny walks. You might eat more fiber with your food. You might eat more sweet potatoes to get that carbohydrate, but also get that fiber. You may want to consume more high quality dark chocolate that has magnesium. You might want to take omega-3 fatty acid supplementation if you don't have oily fish. You might want to take a B vitamin and a magnesium and a vitamin D supplementation if your levels are low, and especially during that time. And that is a great way to deal with that late luteal phase. That is a time that you want to really recover. Maybe it's more sleep. Maybe it's less or no fasting. Sometimes 12-hour fasting can be useful. Sometimes no fasting can be useful. That is a great time to really adjust your fasting with how you're feeling. Now, once you get your period, day 1, 2, and 3, you're starting to feel more energized. That is when you start to train and eat like an athlete again. You can do the longer fast. You can do the more stressful activities. You can pick up maybe one more HIIT class a week, things like that. Your mood, your energy, your sleep, your ability to process stress all goes up. And so I actually use this in my own life. I'll tell you how I use this in my own life. During the late luteal phase, especially as I'm moving through perimenopause, I know that my estrogen levels are low and my progesterone levels are low. Now, I didn't talk much about progesterone in this episode because I didn't want to confuse you with too many different terms and too many different things. Let's just say that progesterone is like kind of like your anti-anxiety, soothing, sleepiness hormone. So as the progesterone goes down during the late luteal phase and also in general in perimenopause, you will start to have sleep issues for some of us, including me. You will have anxiety issues. A lot of people notice, oh my gosh, perimenopause, first time they had anxiety or increased stress. So I really, really take this into account. If I was counseling someone, and I often do counsel people on this, during the late luteal phase, you really want to pull back on the stressful activities in your life. So less fasting, maybe you're sleeping more, maybe you're doing less stressful activities even at work, giving yourself more breaks, more meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. And then, once that you start your cycle and days 2 and 3, you feel good, you're starting to up the ante again. So I hope that makes sense. And then around ovulation is when everything kind of peaks. And if you have the opportunity, if you have your own business or you have an opportunity to kind of like do something big during that time or social, that's the time to plan it. And then, during perimenopause, you're kind of experiencing a long late luteal phase. So the things that I told you to do in the late luteal phase probably come in handy. So in perimenopause, women often feel better when they're eating high fiber diets, high protein diets, and with high probiotic foods. They often feel better when they're taking magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamin D. They often feel better when they're not doing as many stressful activities. So less HIIT, less intense cardio, maybe doing the HIIT session or intense cardio once a week or twice a week at most. Whatever it is that you used to do, maybe turn down the intensity on that and do more walking, do more yoga, Pilates, sunny outdoors, biking, hiking, swimming, that kind of thing to help you with that cortisol level and those inflammation levels during perimenopause. And then, of course, nutrition is king, or I guess queen. And during that time, this is the time that you're going to change your diet, because if you don't change the way you eat, then you have to deal with the increased visceral fat for most women, the increase in appetite, the decrease in energy levels, and the decrease in muscle mass. And so you have to counteract this. So I want to end this episode by reiterating the fact that talking about this is so important. We need to have these conversations. Have this conversation with your friend, your daughter, your mom, your sister, in the next girls' night out. Really say, hey, did you know that estrogen does this? Did you know that you can counteract it by eating like this? There is not enough education out there about how we should be eating, how we should be living, how we should be exercising. There's nobody telling us like, hey, maybe you should be eating more omega-3 fatty acids. Maybe you should be supplementing with magnesium or eating more of it in your diet. Maybe you need to get your vitamin D levels checked. This can be the best part of your life if you come in armed with the knowledge. And that's what I'm here for. I am here to clarify all the noise. Like if you did nothing else but listen to this episode, you will be armed and ready for this next phase of your life. And if you're someone who's not even close to perimenopause, you will still get so much information here because you're going to use it to eat and live with your cycle. For me, even far before I was in perimenopause, I was always interested in how to optimize my cycle and get my body ready for perimenopause. And so what you've heard here is literally the Cliff Notes version of what you should be eating, how you should be living, how you should be exercising during perimenopause and with your cycle. And if you did nothing else, I would say learn what estrogen does to your body. So estrogen is going to make you energized, give you positive affect, make you social, and decrease your appetite. If you just learn that, then you'll learn that when it dips down during perimenopause, you may have a decrease in these. And also, that's what happens during your late luteal phase. Now, like I said, we didn't talk much about progesterone, but remember, progesterone is kind of like the soothing anti-anxiety, sleepiness hormone. And so when you start losing that, that's why those symptoms kind of come about. Women have been long ignored in studies. This episode is meant to be a primer for you, for people who have never heard this information before, or maybe people who have heard this information before, but really want to go deeper into what it means to eat and live and fast and optimize your body with your cycle. So I hope you found value in this. And I want to thank you for joining. I'm Dr. Amy Shah, and thank you for listening to this episode of Save Yourself.